Virgin Most Powerful Radio, sharing the gospel with clarity and charity.
And now, Virgin Most Powerful Radio is pleased to present Hands-On Apologetics with renowned Catholic author and apologist, Gary Michuta.
And welcome everybody, Hands-On Apologetics. You have entered into Virgin Most Powerful's Apologetics Dojo, and it's great to be with you today. You know, doing this thing which we call Hands-On Apologetics, where the rubber of catechesis meets the road of everyday life, where we learn how to explain, defend the faith with clarity, charity, and confidence. And it's great to be with you. Welcome all to the dojo. I am your sensei, Gary Michuta, and got a great show in store for you today. You know, we do cross-training here, and it's not always the same. Every show is different. We focus on a different aspect of the faith to help us better know and love Jesus and be able to share that with others and help clear up misunderstandings. And so today's program, we're going to switch gears, and we're going to talk about Old Testament saints. Now, I know that's kind of odd terminology. You often don't think of Old Testament figures as saints, but nevertheless, you know, the Maccabean martyrs, for example, is part of our martyrology. And, you know, for a long time, other Old Testament saints, too, were honored by the church as saints, like Elijah and Elisha, for example. And two of the most mysterious figures in the Old Testament, in my humble opinion. And so we're going to dive into Scripture on this episode and look at these two prophets, Elijah and Elisha, from the one person I think that could shine the most light on them, because he's walked the walk, folks. He is Steve Ray, you know, the host of Footprints of God series, video series. He also does Footprints of God pilgrimage. He's author, and I'm sure you're all familiar with Steve. You know, Steve has done a remarkable video series on Elijah and Elisha, and so he's going to come on the other side of the break, and Steve's going to kind of lay out the land for us to walk through the remarkable lives of these Old Testament saints. And that's going to be a lot of fun. It's always great to have Steve on the show, and he's just a wealth of info. I always learn a lot, and I know from your emails all of you learn a lot as well. We also are going to do our critical thinking skills. You know, we need to sharpen our intellects to spot fuzzy thinking, and we do that through our Finding the Fallacy segment. Today's Finding the Fallacy is the loaded label fallacy. And also we meet an early church father. Today's early church father, I think, is somewhat unknown. I would bet probably 99% of you listening right now may never have heard him, but it's Saint Germain I of Constantinople. So we're going to look at this early church father. I love that segment because you're introduced to all these wonderful holy Catholics in history who wrote on the faith, and you know, we consider them to be part of this beautiful collection of early church fathers who witnessed to the ancient faith. Very important when you're defending the faith, and also just really cool to know. So that's our program for today. And as always, I kick off the program giving my hellos, my hat tip, my shout out to all of you peeps watching on social media, live stream, Facebook, YouTube, and all the other platforms. Welcome aboard, folks. Great to be with you. I also want to welcome all of you listening on radio around the country and also via podcast around the world through either our handy-dandy phone app or our flagship website, which, of course, is virginmostpowerfulradio.org. That's an important website. You should probably bookmark it because just to keep tabs on what we're doing. Because Virgin Most Powerful, especially with the COVID crisis, we're doing ministry here, and many times it's available for on video. So it doesn't matter whether or not you live near to the world headquarters of Virgin Most Powerful Radio in West Covina, you could check out there's been great men's conferences and so on. And so, stay tuned, check it out. And by the way, also on the website, you can go up to our shows, scroll down the Hands-On Apologetics or any of the other awesome shows, and boom, you have access to everything. And that is part of this Apologetics in Place that we're doing. If you like a show, there's great content, somebody that would be interested in it, please share it. Do all those social media type things to let people know about it, because there's great information, but what good does it do if people aren't accessing it? So you could be doing evangelism in the comfort of your computer chair or Facebook or whatever you're using by spreading the word about our program. So we truly appreciate it. I also want to thank all of you for subscribing to Hands-On Apologetics, and really appreciate it. All right. Anything else? Everything looks good on my end, except Skype is being kind of finicky today. Well, good. As long as it's coming through okay, Richard, I am happy as a clam. Okay, so I'll just ignore the choppy video on my end. Oh, good. Good. The audio's good. So I'll just keep rolling with the punches. Let's do our Finding the Fallacy segment, which is the loaded label, the definition of which is when arguers try to influence an audience by creating a label that supports their argument. So words that are safe or healthy imply that, for example, organic foods are better than non-organic foods, which manipulates the audience's outlook on organic foods. In other words, what labels are is you take a word and you pack it with meaning. And the insidious thing about it is the word may be neutral. It's just descriptive. But with a loaded label, you can load all sorts of content. It could be positive content or negative content. And then just simply by sticking that word on whoever you want to defame or anyone you want to promote, you're kind of loading the argument ahead of time. Okay, for example, let's see. A loaded label would be... I was thinking of big business. Okay, there was a while there where big business is the ultimate evil and pack all sorts of really bad connotations about big business. Well, once you've packed a label with this content, then it's just a matter of sticking it on your enemies. Well, that person's wrong because he's part of the the cabal of big business, and simply by using that label, you kind of expand on all the content that you just packed into it. So be careful of loaded labels, folks. It's used an awful lot today. It's used to shut people up. If somebody doesn't like what you're saying, they won't attack the argument or the contents of the facts, but rather they'll stick a label on you and hope that somehow disqualifies what you're saying. So the loaded label, very insidious, very insidious. So beware. In fact, whenever I'm listening to somebody, as soon as I pick up on loaded labels, your red flag should come up, and you should just ignore it. Just cancel that out. If you're reading something, like maybe if you have a hard copy of a speech or something, and they're applying labels, what I do is I just get a highlighter or a pen and just cross it out, and then reread it without the loaded labels. That's a great way to kind of strip away the veneer of this particular fallacy. And that is our Finding the Fallacy for today, the loaded label fallacy. Why don't we jump to Meet the Early Church Father segment? Meet the Early Church Father. We are going to talk about Saint Germain I of Constantinople, who lived between AD 634, died around AD 733. Germain, sometimes it's also spelled German, is the first of that name to be the Patriarch of Constantinople. Was born there about the year 634. His father was a nobleman named Justinian and was a confidant of the Emperor Heraclius who reigned from 610 to 641. Justinian gradually lost favor, however, with later emperors, and until 668, he was charged with treasonable conspiracy and executed. Germain was castrated and obliged to join the clergy at the Church of the Hagia Sophia. There, his fortunes and influence increased, and he was able to persuade the Emperor Constantine IV, Pognatus, I never could get his name right, to convoke the Third Council, that's the Sixth Ecumenical Council of Constantinople, which condemned the heresy of monothelism in 681. About the year 706, Germain was made the Archbishop of Cyzicus, I think that's how you pronounce it. Accusations is made that under the pressure from the Emperor Philippides Barnabas, and while still the ordinary of that see in 712, a synod of Constantinople, Germain was weak enough to subscribe to the monothelism against which he fought so well earlier. By the way, monothelism, remember folks, monothelism with the THE in the middle has to do with the will, that they believe that Christ had only one will, a divine will. That's different from monophysitism with PHY in the middle, which is that Christ only had one nature. So this heresy is that Christ only had one will, or of course the Orthodox position is that Christ is both truly God and truly man, therefore he has a true divine will and a true human will. Well, anyway, he fought against this heresy, and then later it was weak enough to subscribe to a monothelite program at the synod. It is true afterwards, quickly he reasserted his faith in Christ as having two natures and two wills. In August 715, he was made Patriarch of Constantinople by the Emperor Anastasius II. Germain immediately convoked the Synod of Constantinople in 715 and made a formal condemnation of monothelism. And that's our early church father today, St. Germain. Coming up on the other side of break, our good friend Steve Ray is going to be joining us to talk about Elijah and Elisha.
This is Terry Barber. I want to thank you for supporting Virgin Most Powerful Radio. And here's an easy way to support us by going to smile.amazon.com and type in Catholic Resource Center or Virgin Most Powerful Radio. And when you log in your Amazon account and you purchase products, a portion of it will go right back in supporting Virgin Most Powerful Radio. And it doesn't cost you a dime. I want to thank you ahead of time because that supports us year-round. May God bless you and your family.
Did you know my mom's gonna have a baby?
She is?
Will it be a boy?
Or will it be a girl?
We don't know yet, but we heard the heartbeat and my dad said this is gonna be someone very special.
You mean like being a president? Or maybe a doctor?
Well, probably maybe like a singer or dancer, I think.
Hello, my name is Marianne Koharski. I'm the director of Pro-Life Across America. We know that every baby is a miracle and has the potential to do great things. If you know someone who is pregnant or in need of alternatives or assistance, or would like to support the work of Pro-Life Across America, please call 1-800-366-7773 or visit our website at prolifeacrossamerica.org. Pro-Life Across America is non-political and totally educational.
Pro-Life Across America, the Billboard people.
This is Terry Barber. I want to thank you for your support here at Virgin Most Powerful Radio. Here's an easy way to do it. If you're going to sell or buy a house, call Real Estate for Life, 877-543-3871, because they're going to get you a Christ-centered agent to purchase your home or to sell your home. And at the close of escrow, a portion of his commission goes right back to Virgin Most Powerful Radio. Call 877-543-3871. Thank you so much for your support.
Now, back to Hands-On Apologetics with Gary Machuda. If you'd like to join the conversation, call 888-526-2151. Here's Gary.
And welcome back, everybody, Hands-On Apologetics. And we're going to talk about saints, not necessarily Christian saints, but Old Testament saints. Many of you may not be familiar that, yes, the Maccabean martyrs are heralded as saints. And also there were Old Testament saints, at least the old rite. So who are these saints? We're going to focus in on two, I think, of the most fascinating figures in the Old Testament, Elijah and Elisha, and there's no one better than master apologist Steve Ray to do this. Steve, as you well know, is the host of the Footprints of God video series. He also hosts pilgrimages. He's the author of numerous books, some very important apologetic works like Crossing the Tiber, On This Rock, and his latest book, The Papacy, What the Pope Does and Why It Matters. You can check out all his great stuff at www.catholicconvert.com. And Steve Ray, welcome back to Hands On Apologetics.
Thank you, Gary Machuda. Glad to be here. And I like these two guys. I followed them around the world, so good to talk about them.
Yeah, you have a video that features them. Tell me a little bit about making the video.
There it is. That
All
is a movie that we made a year or two ago. Am I getting it right in there? There we go. And it's called Elijah and Elisha. But see, Catholics usually call him Elisha, and as a Protestant, I grew up calling him Elisha.
Oh.
But, when we made the movie, I had to remember to call him Elisha, simply because with the wind blowing and with speaking to the camera, Elijah and Elisha sound way too close. And it's hard to make people, did he say Elijah or did he say Elisha? So we did the Catholic pronunciation, but my wife had to keep saying, cut, you said Elisha. You got to say Elisha. So we'd have to do it over.
Yeah,
So,
that's just like Augustine, too. Protestants usually say Augustine.
Yep.
We say Augustine.
Yep, that's right.
Yep.
And I think Elisha is correct, because that's what I understand it is in Hebrew, or in the original language, it would have been Elisha. But I also didn't like it because it sounds like a girl's name, because Elisha is also a girl's name spelled different. So, and he's anything but girly, this guy.
Yeah, that's true.
Anything but girly.
So
Well,
if anybody's
filmed
not
this.
familiar with your video, I mean, you did tremendous work on it. I mean, you're on location. What do you cover?
It took us a year pretty much to make it. And the reason we chose them is I did Abraham, which starts with creation and works through Abraham, and Isaac and Jacob, ends up on their way to Egypt. The movie, then the next one was Moses, which starts out in Egypt and works through the Exodus around Jericho, conquering Jericho and into the Promised Land. And then we did the third one was David and Solomon, which gives you an idea of the kings and the whole structure of the beginning of the kingdom of Israel. And Elijah and Elisha cover about 1,000 years. They cover pretty much from 800 BC to the time of John the Baptist and Mary. So these guys, in doing this 90-minute movie, we wanted to cover that whole section of the Bible, the later kings and the prophets. And Elijah's the father of the prophets, so he's kind of the main one, and then all the others follow after him. He's kind of he's the best, he's the most well-known. He's kind of the prototype of all the rest of them. He's the beginning. And we had to film it. We were on the road 20 days in 3 countries, staying at 7 hotels. Had a lot of miracles take place along the way, but it was filmed in Israel and a lot of the Palestinian areas. Also, we filmed it in Jordan and in Egypt. Part of it in the Sinai. We went up Mount Sinai and found the place where Elijah actually met God up there. And then we also went and found the tomb of Elisha and John the Baptist, which is in the monastery of St. Macarius out in the deserts of Egypt. So we covered a lot of territory, covered the whole story. And if you want to see these 2 prophets and kind of like go on a pilgrimage, since you can't do it in an airplane and a bus, you're going to see it kind of in a better way here anyway, because you're going to see things here I would never be able to take a group to show them.
Yeah, that's a great point too, because with your video series, you really do feel like you are right there on the spot. You do such a great job, and probably now through the COVID crisis, most people are running out of things to watch on Netflix. This is a great way to fortify your faith, and it's very entertaining too.
And it's you could go on a pilgrimage. I say that if you start with Abraham, and they're on my website, they got a good deal on them. You get one free if you buy the 8, you get the 9th one free. They all have a complete study guide in them, so you won't find a study guide like this on Elijah and Elisha anywhere. And the one on Mary obviously has a very complete Mary study guide, and Abraham has each one has their own study guide. So I got the Old Testament covers through Abraham, Moses, David, and Solomon, Elijah, and Elisha. Then the New Testament covers Mary, because Mary's in the middle. Her and John the Baptist, they're not Old Testament, they're not New Testament. They're in the middle. They're kind of like this big bridge between the Old and the New Testament. So it starts with Mary, then goes to Jesus, called Word Became Flesh, and then Peter, Keeper of the Keys. And then we do Paul, which I filmed in 6 countries, and then Apostolic Fathers. And that's the first Christians, are the guys from the 1st century and into the beginning of the 2nd. And then we still have to film Doctors of the Church, but I'm having to postpone that for another year or two because of all this hysteria.
Yeah, right.
So people can actually go on a pilgrimage. If you want to go on a pilgrimage to the Holy Land and way beyond, you want to do a pilgrimage study, go through the whole story of the Bible, from creation and the Old Testament, New Testament into the early church. These are fun. They're energetic. I wrestle snakes. I fall in the mud. I ride and fall off horses. I climb trees. I pour oil over my head. I even, in this one, I eat grasshoppers.
And how was it, by the way?
They were tasty. If you in real life, Gary, once when I was in Israel and I was telling the group, I said John the Baptist ate grasshoppers and wild honey. Now, the reason it comes up in the movie John the Baptist is because he's kind of the fulfillment of Elijah. Elijah and John the Baptist are like Old and New Testament parallels. Then we really bring that out in the story, the typology between those two. And we know that John the Baptist ate grasshoppers. So I was in the movie, I'm frying up a pan of something. You don't know what it is. I'm sitting in front of a campfire and I'm cooking and it's sizzling away. And I'm eating, wow, this is really good. These grasshoppers are delicious. And I was starting to talk about what John the Baptist ate. But one time when I was out at Qumran, which is only 2 miles away from the place where John the Baptist baptized. And by the way, that's the same place that Elijah went up into heaven. I said to these guys, hey, if anybody catches a grasshopper, I'll eat it because I love living the Bible in the Holy Land. Well, these 4 smart Alecks, they went out and they found a big 4-inch wiggly grasshopper like this, and they brought him back to me. And Janet says, what are you going to do now, Steve? I said, I keep my word, and if John the Baptist and Mary and Jesus can eat them, so can I. And I chucked him in, and I ate him, and his legs were kicking out, and I chewed him up and swallowed him. So anybody that goes on a future pilgrimage, I did it once. I don't need to do it twice. I got it recorded on video. That was enough.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's a great point, too, because there is this strong typology between Elijah, who is such a mysterious figure, and John the Baptist. What about Elijah's successor, Elisha?
Elisha and Jesus are parallels.
Okay.
So you have John the Baptist represents Elijah, and Jesus is kind of following after Elisha. There's parallels there. Interestingly enough, John the Baptist was baptizing, and when I take our groups there and we're at the baptismal site of John the Baptist, and I like doing that in Israel, but it's even better in Jordan because that's the actual site. Jesus was baptized on the other side of the Jordan River in the country of Jordan, so that's where I filmed that whole section there. And if you walk just away from the baptismal site 5-10 minutes, there's this big hill, and it's called Mar Elias, which means Saint Elijah. That's how you say Elias is Elijah in Arabic, in Aramaic. So, and even Jesus, when he's on the cross, it says Elias. You know, it's in Aramaic it says it. And my best friend in Jordan, his name is Elias. That's a Christian name over there. And right when you walk 5 minutes from the place where John was baptizing, there's a hill called Mar Elias. And from the earliest tradition, it says that's where Elijah was taken up into heaven in the whirlwind and in the chariots with the horses from heaven, the flaming horses from heaven. And Elisha saw him go up and got his mantle, and then he took over. And he said, I want twice the power. I want double the spirit of Elijah. And if you look at it, interestingly enough, he does twice as many miracles as Elijah has recorded. So that's just an interesting little note. So that you look at these two guys, Elijah and John the Baptist, they're the only two that have ever mentioned in the Bible wore a hairy robe and a leather belt around their waist. Right. And when you notice things like that, you have to say, ooh, I wonder if there's a connection here. You know, why would the writers tell us that? Why would the gospel writers tell us that John the Baptist wore a hairy robe? He was kind of a hairy guy, and he wore a leather belt. If somebody else in the Old Testament hadn't had that they're trying to make the connection with. And they're both out in the wilderness. They're both kind of antisocial. I don't mean that, you know, that they were bad guys, but they were kind of loners, kind of hermit kind of guys living out in the desert, out in the wilderness. Both of them were. And they both dressed alike, and they kind of lived alike, and they both had a great passion. And Jesus even says that, in case you want to know, John the Baptist is Elijah, who is to come. Because the end of the Old Testament, the book of Malachi, ends with, there's going to come a hairy guy with a leather belt, and he's going to be kind of just like Elijah, or says actually that Elijah will return. And Jesus said, in case you don't realize it, this guy, John the Baptist, he came in the power, the spirit and the power of Elijah. He is the one who is Elijah, who is to come. Not that Elijah is going to be reincarnated or coming back from heaven or something, but John the Baptist is the fulfillment, and he's came in the spirit and power of Elijah. And so you better listen to him, because he came to make straight the way of the Lord, and here I am. This is John said, I'm fulfilling that role, and here is the Lord. That's how we introduce Jesus, by going all the way back to the prophets and to Elijah.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, you know, they both are so fascinating. You know, like you mentioned, John the Baptist is the last prophet of the Old Testament, where John the Baptist didn't prophesy Christ, he pointed him out. You know,
yes.
He prophesied with his finger.
That's right. Yeah. That's him right there.
Yep.
And that's why one of the reasons he's so important too, because he is the bridge. John the Baptist is the last of the Old Testament prophets. He's the first of the New Testament prophets. So he's right there in the middle. Very, very important role. For 400 years there was silence, no prophets since Malachi. And everybody's waiting. 400 years is a long time for God not to speak. And you're waiting for him. And so, has he forgotten us? Where is God? We're under the Romans. We're under the, you know, it's been a long time. Look at our country is only, 250 years old? We're talking 400 years of silence. And under foreign occupation that whole 400 years. And then all of a sudden, it comes.
That's right. I hear the music coming up. We're chatting with Steve Ray about two great prophets, Elijah and Elisha. Stay tuned, folks. This is Hands-On Apologetics.
Hi, this is Jesse Romero from the Terry and Jesse Show, also from Jesus 911. Let's face it, we all need to use the internet, but we need screen accountability. Why? Pornography is a huge problem, especially on the internet. And every time we tap into the internet, we get bombarded with images and temptations that degrade our humanity. So we need Covenant Eyes to block these pornographic sites and advertisements from infiltrating our lives. Covenant Eyes helps us take custody of our eyes and custody of our intellect. So I recommend you go to covenanteyes.com and type in the promo code VMPR to support the network. Protect yourself and your family from the imminent threats on the internet. www.covenanteyes.com, code VMPR, live porn free. Thank you for listening to Virgin Most Powerful Radio. Thank you. God bless you. Keep the faith.
Psalm 119 says, Your word is a lamp for my feet and a light to my path. According to St. John Paul II, being a Christian means saying yes to Jesus Christ. It consists in surrendering to the Word of God and relying on it, but also endeavoring to know better and better the profound meaning of this Word. May God grant that we always rely on His Word, read it often, and put it into practice.
Buying or selling your home or your business property? This is Terry Barber. Real Estate for Life underwrites the Terry and Jesse Show. And they can connect you to one of 900 pro-life real estate agents around the world. And when they receive their referral fee, they will give 80% of it to a pro-life organization. Wow! That's 80%! realestateforlife.org, 877-LIFE-US1.
This is Jesse Romero. You're listening to Hands-On Apologetics with Gary Machuda on Virgin Most Powerful Radio.
And welcome back, everybody, to Hands-On Apologetics, and we are chatting with Master Apologist Steve Ray, author of numerous books, but most especially in regards to today, we are talking about one of his videos in his video series, Footprints of God, specifically the prophets of Elijah and Elisha. And as Steve pointed out, Elijah prefigures John the Baptist, Elisha prefigures Christ. And Steve, I think of all the figures in the Old Testament, Elijah is just packed with mystery, you know. Tell us a little bit about the circumstances in which he lived.
Well, he is a very, like I said, kind of a loner, but he's also one tough buzzard. Yeah. I like to think of him that way. I think of him as being a hairy guy because it mentions that. He's from Tishbe, and when you're filming the life of Elijah, we spent a good bit of the time, at least half the time in Jordan, on the other side of the Jordan River. And I picture him, at one point, I dress a little like him just to show, and I said, if you met Elijah on the at Tishbe where he was born, would you recognize him? Would you know it was him? But he wears this rough, kind of like, I picture it maybe like a burlap bag. And prophets were known to wear camel hair, is kind of rough and rugged, brown, almost like a monk. You know, I think that probably he's one of the forerunners of monasticism because of the kind of the way he lived. John the Baptist too, and John the Baptist was probably a member of the Qumran community, and they were monastic. They lived in the caves, in singular caves. But I have on this rough, like a burlap sack over me, and a big leather belt, and I have a sheep's wool, brown sheep's wool over my shoulder because he had a mantle, they called it. Nobody knows exactly what the mantle was or how it looked, but a lot of scholars and historians say that it was like a big sheepskin. So I carried that with me. And so I said, this is probably what he looked like. Now, he also was he had hair, not like this, but Elisha, he was a bald-headed guy. And we'll get to that in a minute. So I kind of like him, you know, he was a bald-headed guy. But Elijah, imagine him as being wiry, maybe short and wiry and dark-skinned and rugged and just darting around in the underbrush over there in Israel. And he was fearless because when it says all of Jerusalem came down to see him. Now, where is John the Baptist or Elijah? Because Elijah was there a good part of his life. It is the lowest place on the face of the earth. When you go to the Jordan River at the north tip of the Dead Sea, it's 1,250 feet below sea level. So if Mount Everest is the highest place on the face of the earth, the Jordan Valley is the lowest place. And it's hot down there, very, very hot. So Elijah would have lived a lot of his life there. He was born in Tishbe. There's a hill called Mar Elias, and there were 2 churches built there and one of the largest monasteries in the Middle East, commemorating his birthplace. And there still is, although when I first started going there, it was real easy to see, and now I think it's starting to disappear because they just don't understand the treasures they have over there, because it's still a Muslim country. And they don't understand the history, I don't think, but there was a mosaic, and it said, it was a priest, Saba, said, pray for me, pray to Saint Elijah for Saba the priest. So you know that even from the 6th century, they were recognizing that that was his birthplace. And when you stand at his birthplace and you look out over the Jordan Valley, across the Jordan River into Israel, there's a mound right there, and that's where Elisha was born. So from Elijah's house, it's like you get, hey, Elisha, how you doing over there? I mean, it's a couple miles away, but you get the impression they could yell back and forth to each other. Huh. And when we went to find Elijah's house, hometown was easy. The buffer zone between Israel and Jordan, which is still a military area, and it's along these barbed wire fences. And I knew where it was because I found it on geographical maps. And we wanted to get to the actual place of his birth, but it's called, the name just skipped my mind, Mahula. And it's in the military area. And so you have to go along this barbed wire fence, which is all cameras and everything. And we knew and there was big signs, military only, stay out. So our guide, Amir, and us and our filming crew, they said, what do you want to do? I said, well, you know what I want to do. You guys have worked with me enough. We have to get in there, get the footage. We're going to do it like guerrilla fighters. We're going to go in, we're going to set it up, get it. I have to get my takes in one take. I can't, do it again. We're going to do it in one take. I'm going to be standing by this barbed wire fence. It says landmines, with skull and crossbones. And I said, and then we're going to get in, and we're going to do it, and we're going to throw the stuff in the back of the car. We're going to get out of here before the police, because they see us on the cameras. They'll be here, the military. So we got it all done, and sure enough, as soon as we got it done, we're throwing the stuff in. Here comes the military vehicles with their machine guns on it, and they surrounded us. And they said, what are you doing down here? This is a military area. So we played dumb. Oh, well, we're filming the life of Elisha. He was born right here. This is dangerous. You can't be dying. Oh, we're very sorry. We packed, and they escorted us back out. So I mean, these movies are tough to make, but somebody's got to do it. Otherwise, you won't see the places. But I take you to the real places. So a lot of it was filmed in Jordan because that's where Elijah was born, and that's where Elijah went up into heaven, and that's where he baptized. Another interesting thing, Gary, is the place where Elijah was living and went up into heaven is the same place where John the Baptist was baptizing later. But look at the parallels here. That one place in the Jordan River, Moses and Joshua were on the Jordan side. Moses stayed on that side, and Joshua went across. Yes, that's right. And Joshua went across. Then you have Elijah and Elisha are on the other side, in the Jordan side. Elijah goes up into heaven, and Elisha goes back across into Israel. Then later you have also, there's one more parallel. Then we come to Jesus and John the Baptist. Jesus and John the Baptist are on the other side. They're not in Israel. They're on the Jordan side today, because it says he was in Bethany beyond the Jordan. And John the Baptist stayed there, and Jesus crossed into the other side. So you got three couplets of one meeting there at that very place. One stays on the other side, and the other one goes across. Now, out of that three couplets, one from each of them was on the Mount of Transfiguration, and one from each of those couplets we know fasted for 40 days. Now, that's just, I don't know what to do with that yet, but it is an interesting historical biblical tidbit that I still chew on every once in a while. Yeah. But that's where John the Baptist came. And I say to people, I think that he came to that place because that is where Elijah went up into heaven. So when the Pharisees all came down and said, wait a minute, this right here is where Elijah went up into heaven. He went up from here, and the prophet said he's coming back. Are you him? Did you just come back down here? And that's, I think, why he was baptizing there, where he could have baptized anywhere else.
Yeah. Boy, that's fascinating. And especially, that's really why I appreciate your video series, is because you don't pick this up in books. It's one thing to actually see it, especially I'd be there, and see those parallels, where if you're just reading the scripture text or, reading a book about it, you can't see those connections.
You have to visit the land. That's why we call it the fifth gospel, gospel number 5, because you can learn a lot from reading Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John and the Old and New Testament in black and white. But when you go there, and I've been there over 180 times now, when you go there, you see it in widescreen Technicolor, and you say, this is where that happened, and this is where that happened. Well, look how close they are, or look how far they are, or look at Look at the situation John lived in. This is very primitive that he would have lived in. Nobody would have been out there. He would have been all by himself out there. And then to know that the Jews, it says all of Jerusalem came down. That's over 20 miles. They came from Jerusalem, which is 3,000 feet above sea level. They came all the way down 20 miles to the lowest place, 1,250 feet below sea level. And then they had to turn around and walk back all the way up the hill, all the way back up there. So when you go and visit these places, it's interesting because you get to see a lot of the proximities, and it also adds to the story. Like when we go to Mount Sinai, we had to go there for Moses, of course, getting the law there, but we also have been there a lot of times, but we also had to go for this one because it says that Elijah ran away from King Ahab. We'll talk about him in a minute. And he was depressed. And he even says he went under a broom tree. So I found a broom tree out in the Judean wilderness, and I laid under it. And I said, and Elijah was so depressed, he said, just kill me now and get it over with. Go ahead. I'd rather just die. Kill me now, and let's get this over with. But he said then he went 40 days all the way to Mount Sinai. And it said he went up Mount Sinai, and we found the place where he went. We found the cave where he stayed and where he met God. And God didn't come like he did with Moses in the earthquake and in the fire and in the wind. It said that there was a still small voice. In Hebrew, it even means silence, that God came in the silence. And in the movie, we say that Elijah was in serious need of some spiritual counseling, a spiritual director, and God happened to be his spiritual director up there and says, now go back and get back to work. I didn't call you to sit up here on the mountain and cry about it. Get back to work, buddy. And so he had to travel back. And then after he went back, he chose Elisha. But we can't, time's running short, and we can't not talk about what Elijah's main ministry was. The kings of Israel were always enticed by the gods of the surrounding cultures. And I always used to wonder, why were they so enticed? Why were they always going after Baal and Asherah and Moloch and Chemosh and the gods that surrounded the people there? Why would they have been so seduced by them? They always were. And I came up with 4. I'll see if I can remember why. The first one is because they came out of Egypt where they were brickmakers. And they came to take over this land, which was agrarian. This is where you live by gardening, by farming. Even today, when you drive through Israel, the fields just stretch forever, and it's a breadbasket. The Jezreel Valley is just lusciously green and fertile. And so they learned the agrarian lifestyle from the Canaanites. And the Canaanites worshiped these gods, and the Canaanites said, look, guys, I know you took our country over, but they still kind of cohabited a little bit because they didn't kick them all out like they were supposed to. It's a thorn in their side for the rest of the time. That's why Goliath kept showing up, They should have gotten them out before they had the chance.
Well, we got a break there. I hear music coming up. Yeah, we'll continue this. Chatting with Steve Ray about the great pop, Elisha and Elijah. Stay tuned.
Help the Helpless, a Minnesota St. Paul nonprofit organization chaired by Father of Tear and volunteers, is humbly asking you for your kind support to help the poor and the handicapped children in India and Ecuador. Through financial support from the Help of the Helpless benefactors, the children are provided with clothing, food, education, shelter, and the teachings of the Catholic Church. The mission is to help children thrive and become self-sufficient young adults leading productive lives. We also provide aid to poor families in Ecuador with food baskets, medicines, medical assistance, and help with funeral needs for the deceased. The work in India is done by Father Antonio's organization, St. Mary's. In Ecuador, the work is being done by the Servant Sisters of the Home of Mother. You can call us at 877-762-8857. To learn more, please visit our website, www.helpthehelpless.org. God bless you.
Healthcare news today seems to be coming from everywhere and everyone. It's confusing at least and untrustworthy at the worst. Dr. Aceta is a faithful Catholic in the Kern County community. He is trustworthy, well-researched, and will only give expert opinion on matters in his own specialty. Catholic teaching at its entirety is of utmost importance to Dr. Aceta. Give Dr. Aceta a call for your obstetrics and gynecological needs at 661-695-6617.
Buying or selling your home or your business property? This is Terry Barber. Real Estate for Life underwrites the Terry and Jesse Show, and they can connect you to one of 900 pro-life real estate agents around the world. And when they receive their referral fee, they will give 80% of it to a pro-life organization. Wow, that's 80%. realestateforlife.org, 877-LIFE-US1.
Now, back to Hands-on Apologetics with Gary Machuda. If you'd like to join the conversation, call 888-526-2151. Here's Gary.
And welcome back, everybody. Hands-on Apologetics. We are chatting with Master Apologist Steve Ray about Elijah and Elisha. Right before the break, Steve, you actually asked a question that I've given a lot of thought to as well, is what was so attractive about these pagan religions? And you mentioned that, well, you know, Canaan, they had to live alongside these pagan worshipers, and it's a agrarian culture, so there was that temptation there of kind of syncretism.
They had to learn farming because they'd been making bricks for 400 years. They didn't know how to farm this land. So they had to learn from the Canaanites, and in the process of learning it, the Canaanites said, by the way, if you want it to rain, you better pray to Baal because he's the guy that brings the rain. And so, and they said, well, we have the God Yahweh. Hey, listen, we lived here a long time, buddy. You want it rain? And they started to learn the spiritual part of agrarian life like they did the physical part. Now, another thing is us Christians and the Jews have always had a disadvantage because we can't see God. He's invisible. And these guys had visible gods. They could carry him around in their pockets. I got one right here. I'll show you. Just a second, I should have brought it up. This is actually an ancient god Baal. This is actually is Baal. It's a statue of him, and it's kind of cool because you can carry Baal around in your pocket. You know, you can see him. You can have him setting. Even when Jacob was coming away from Laban, and I do all this in the movie too, in the other one on Abraham. But Rachel stole her father's household gods. These kind of guys that they actually thought were gods, and they carried them around and prayed to them. So we have the disadvantage. We can't see God. We have an invisible God. It makes it a little difficult. It's kind of nice to be able to see your gods, And then the third thing was that they were extremely sexual. The whole thing was orgies because it was fertility. It was all about fertilities. And I know this is a family show, but if you view the earth as like the female who receives the seed of the rain from the clouds, you've got this kind of vision of male and female almost. And these are the male fertility gods, and everything becomes very sexual. We're sexual at the temples and so on. Going into a prostitute was almost like a sacrament. It was a thing that would help bring about the rains and so on. So it was a very sacramental but very sexual thing going on. And this appealed to the baser instincts of these guys. That you can get away with things that your natural base instincts draw you towards, and it's spiritually accepted. See, it's a thing. Right. And another one was, don't think that behind these gods there weren't some demonic powers. Because even in the book of Deuteronomy and Psalms, and Paul says it in Corinthians, that behind those gods are demons. And don't think those demons didn't do things for these people, give them power in order to keep them seduced and enticed to follow those deities. So these are the reasons I came up with why it was so easy for the Israelites to be seduced by these gods. And Elijah, his primary mission in life was to resist. That's why Ahab was the king of Israel, and he married Jezebel from the Phoenicia, which is Lebanon of today, and she came down because Baal is the god of rain and the god of thunder and the god of storms. You really like Baal because he can bring the rain on your fields, and that was their god. So she came down and she killed all of the Israelite prophets of Yahweh, and she built altars for Baal, and they were now Israel was going to be worshiping Baal, and we got rid of Yahweh and all his prophets and his priests, setting up a whole new pagan religion. And Elijah, he wasn't going to hear about that for 1 minute. And he was fearless, went right up. And in Israel, in Sebastia, there is still the steps going up to what was called the Ivory Palace of Ahab. And I've taken groups there and we filmed there. And they still found pieces of ivory all around because it was known to be a very elegant, made of ivory, which was something very expensive, still is, even illegal and banned even today. But he went right up the steps and he confronted Ahab and said, because you have followed the god of Baal, it will not rain in this country until I say so. Now you've got established the dueling deities. You've got two gods that are going to fight. Which one is really the god of rain and storms? If it's Baal, then let him bring the rain. But if it's Yahweh, my God, says Elijah, there's not going to be any rain until I say so. And it won't happen until I say so. And it took 3.5 years before Elijah said so. So this whole time, though, you would think that Ahab and Jezebel would knuckle under and say, hey, maybe we made a mistake here. This guy stopped the rain. And in that area, up in that part of Israel, it rains average 26 inches a year. So it's not like it's a dry area. 26 inches on average a year is a lot of rain. And Elijah stopped it for 3.5 years. Then there's this big duel. And he says, we're going to meet you up at Mount Muraka. And that's a mountain that's in the Carmel mountain range. And the Carmel mountain range is where Elijah spent a lot of time. And that's where the Carmelite headquarters are, because the Carmelites look to Elijah as their patron saint of the Carmelites. So there's a monastery there, the Star of the Sea, a Star of the Sea, and it's the Carmelite Monastery there, which is the headquarters of the Carmelites. And so he says, you meet me up there, you bring all of your retinue, all of your people, you come up to the top of that mountain, we're going to see which God is really the God of rain and storm, and which God can answer from heaven. So sure enough, if you want to read this, it's probably one of the more exciting chapters in the Bible, 1 Kings chapter 18. Sit down and put your seatbelt on when you read that chapter, because it's a pretty exciting chapter, especially if you use your imagination and put yourself in the scene. And from the top of Mount Muraka, you can look out over all of Israel. You can look out, see the Mediterranean Sea. You can see Mount Tabor. You could see all of Israel almost from up there. What a great place to see who could call down fire from heaven. So we went up there again, and I had to film up there, of course. And this is where the prophets of Baal, 450 of them, were calling on Baal. Elijah said, build an altar here and build another altar here and put a big bull on that one and kill a bull and put it on that one. And that will be yours and this will be mine. And you spend the day, you call on Baal and see if he can send fire down from heaven, because he's also the God of fire. And they yell and they dance, 450 of them all day long. And then he said in the evening, they start cutting themselves with knives and doing repetitious vain prayers. By the way, for all those who have been accused of that, saying that the rosary is vain repetition prayers, that's not. The repetition is not the problem. It's the vain part that's the problem. And this is example what the pagans do. Jesus said, and what did they do? Go up on Mount Muraka and you'll see what they do. They were calling on and repeating these prayers. They were vain. They were cutting themselves, repeating the prayers. Nothing happened. Elijah mocks them. This is one of the funniest parts of the Bible too. But you don't know it if you don't know biblical literacy. Because he says, maybe he's sleeping. Call louder. Maybe he's on a journey. And then the one I love is maybe he's on the toilet. Maybe your God's on the toilet. He's busy right now. You're going to have to wait till he gets off the toilet. And the way you know that is because in biblical terms, when you refer to in polite ways using the toilet, which, some people are probably saying, he shouldn't say that on Gary's show. But in those days, you said, step aside. When Jesus and his 12 disciples were walking along the Sea of Galilee in the morning, one by one, they would say, hey, guys, I have to step aside. I'll catch up with you in a minute. That means I'm going to go into the bushes. I'll take care of business, and I'll catch up with you in a minute. Even Jesus had to do this every day. Don't forget that. He took on a human body. So Elijah's mocking and saying, maybe your God's on the toilet. Maybe that's why he's not sending down fire from heaven. Well, at the end of the day, he said, okay, you guys, you failed. Step aside. Now I'm going to show you who the real God of Israel is. His name happens to be Yahweh. He's the one that brought us out of Egypt. He's the one that does it. He is really the God of rain and fire and everything else. And he's going to destroy your thoughts of Baal. And he said, pour water on the altar. Now, this is very extravagant because there's been no water for 3.5 years. Somebody had to go down to the bottom and bring up buckets of water, and they poured it on the altar. He said, more, fill the ditch with water, cover it. This was very extravagant. It was very audacious to be telling them to pour water, which they didn't have any of, no rain. And so when he finally there, he says, now he calls on Yahweh, the God from heaven, and said, fire came down. It licked up the bull on the altar. It burned and licked up the stones, and it even burned all the water that was in the trench. And everybody was like, oh, the Lord, he is God. And they all fall down and start to worship him. But Ahab and Jezebel say, the way you, and then, oh, by the way, Elijah took them all down to the Kishon River, which I went to, and in order to demonstrate how he killed all 450 prophets with a sword. I bought some big watermelons, and I had a big sword I got out of Bethlehem. It's a real sword. And I went down and I said, and then he slew them with a sword, and I chopped those watermelon all to pieces in the river there. And the river turned red with blood in Elijah's day, and it turned red with watermelon juice in my day. But he killed them all. And then Ahab and Jezebel said, just like you left those prophets, so will you be tomorrow. You're going to be dead. Instead of repenting, instead of saying, wow, that was pretty impressive, you do have the real God, they didn't. They were set in their ways, and they said they're going to kill him. That's why he got depressed, went out in the desert, fell asleep under a broom tree. An angel came and he said, just kill me, just kill me. They're not listening to me. And he says, no, God always has his people. Well, then he chose Elisha, and Elisha carried on that ministry. And Elisha now, he was a bald-headed guy, and you know how we know that? Because when he saw Elijah go up into heaven on the chariots, by the way, that was a preparation for the Blessed Virgin Mary, who was also going to go up to heaven, body and soul, without dying. Or maybe she died. John Paul II said she died. But the point is, body and soul into heaven, just like Elijah did. And also in the Old Testament, Enoch. And when God said, if you see the horses come, you will receive a double portion. And so Elijah threw his mantle down. Elisha caught the mantle and wore it. And then he went up to the Jordan River. Now, Elijah had already parted the waters, just like Joshua had done. Mm-hmm. And so he took the mantle and he struck the water, and he says, where's the God of Elijah? And the waters parted. So I went down with my mantle in the movie, and I slapped in the water. I said, where's the God of Elijah? I did it again. Nothing happened. I said, oh, well, I'm not a prophet. But once he did that, he went up to Bethel, which is just a short walk up. And when he went up to Bethel, a bunch of young ruffians, a mob. Mobs can be scary. And they're young guys, but the word used means young boys, but it can mean teenagers as well. And I was once surrounded in the Kidron Valley by a group of young boys, unsupervised, and they wanted money from us. And it was a very scary time before I got those 30 guys away from us. Yeah. And I can imagine Elisha being there, and it said that there were at least 42 were damaged, but so there could have been maybe 100 that came down, and they started to mock him. They pointed over to the Jordan River right over there, and they said, hey, your protege Elijah, he just went up. Why don't you go up too, you bald head? Why don't you go up, you bald head?
Yeah.
Bald, 42. Don't ever mock a prophet, and don't mock bald-headed guys.
That's right. Steve, thank you so much for coming on the show. We're already out of time. Steve Ray, ladies and gentlemen, go to CatholicConvert.com. Coming up next, the Terry and Jesse Show. Stay tuned, and thanks for listening. Bye-bye.
In the 1990s, I lived and worked in Hollywood. But when my wife Betty's mom took ill, we relocated to Orange County. And it was during this time in our lives that I converted to Catholicism. Once my eyes were opened to the truth, I couldn't learn enough about the faith. But I had less free time than ever, especially with a long commute. That's when I discovered the real value of Catholic audio. Listening to cassette tapes transformed my daily commute into a miniature retreat. And that's the beauty of Virgin Most Powerful Radio today. Since the podcasts are archived, you can listen anytime on our smartphone app. I know how listening to Catholic audio can bring you closer to Christ and His Church. So I encourage you to visit the App Store or go to vmpr.org and download the app today. It just might change your life. I'm Matthew Arnold for Virgin Most Powerful Radio.